Today we're going to be reviewing the Mark III A70 Toyota Supra. Now, unlike most videos of a Supra where you'd see it drifting on the track or hype over the new BMW Supra, we're going to be taking a look under the hood and underneath this vehicle to see what's made it so legendary over the past 30 years. And we're going to start underneath the hood where we have Toyota 7M GTE 3-liter inline 6 turbocharged engine, and it's situated right in the middle longitudinally for rear wheel drive. Now you'll notice that there's quite a lot of room under the hood of this Supra, and that's because an inline 6-cylinder engine is a pretty long engine to fit, but this is also 1987 where everything is really well laid out and accessible. Now out of the factory, this engine made about 231 horsepower and 240 pound-feet of torque, which was a lot for its time. However, this engine's been completely rebuilt and this car's been modified quite a bit, so not everything I'm going to show you is going to be exactly original as it rolled out of the factory. Now this engine was pretty advanced for its time. It had a double overhead cam design with the intake on this side and the exhaust on this side, represented by these two cam gears here. The timing cover is just missing, but it is driven by a timing belt. Now this engine also had 4 valves per cylinder, an aluminum head, but an iron block, which arguably formed a good basis for a built engine. However, the 7M did not come without any issues, with the main thing being that the head bolts were under torqued from the factory, which means that your head gasket would blow and then you'd lose compression and pretty much have to rebuild the top half of the engine. Now if you take a look at the air intake, which is probably what makes this vehicle the most interesting, we have a warm air intake here that probably replaced the factory air box. It flows by this mass airflow sensor here, and then just a straight tube that goes into the turbocharger. There's no emissions or anything else in the way. Whoever designed this air intake though didn't really think of it either, and they kind of had to bend it out of the way, so it's a little bit awkward to access that. Now the turbocharger on this car is a standard CT26 turbocharger, and it's right out in the open here. It's driven off of the exhaust manifold, and that's just going to boost the pressure of the air that's flowing intake here before going back down into the air intercooler. Now that boosted air coming off the turbo is going to come down into this charged air pipe underneath the vehicle here and then travel over to this air intercooler. Now because the front of this vehicle is so pointed, the air intercooler has to be located on a slight angle here. Now that boosted air is then going to go in through this tube here and get cooled off and then come back out through this pipe over here. And if we loop back underneath the headlight, that air intake tube is going to continue back up over here to the top of the engine into the air intake plenum. Now over here at the air intake plenum we have a throttle body, and it's a good old mechanical drive-by cable throttle body. We have a throttle linkage over here which then joins to the throttle cable from the gas pedal, and also the cable from the cruise control actuator. Now the cruise control actuator on this car is vacuum actuated. Now once that boosted air is past the throttle body, it's just going to fall down into this air intake, and it is made of solid metal, unlike plastic of modern vehicles. Now because this is the 80s, this is the only plastic cover that resides on the engine. There's no other decoration or aerodynamic pieces under here. Now the ignition system in this vehicle was pretty unique. It was the first coil style ignition instead of a distributor in the US for a Toyota model. Got 3 individual coils here. Each of them fire 2 cylinders, and they have these wires that lead up to the spark plugs, which are located in the middle of the bank here between the 2 valve covers. Now because this vehicle does not have variable valve timing, the cams and the crank are all going to spin at the same speed, and it can get away with just using 1 cam position sensor to send a signal to the ECU of the engine RPM. Now if we take a look at the drive belt setup on this 7M engine, it starts here at the crank pulley. Now that crank pulley is going to drive 1 belt that's going to go to the water pump and this fan pulley, and that's also going to come over to the alternator located right on the top of the engine. We've got a separate belt that goes over to the power steering pump located at the side here, and that runs off of the crank pulley, and then yet another separate belt that goes to the AC compressor located down here. This one's been disconnected for more horsepower. Now servicing the belt or any of the accessories on the front of this engine is pretty easy to access once you get this fan out of the way. There's a lot of room here to work, unlike modern vehicles where the engine's right up against the radiator. You've also got easy access to those drive belts from down below here. Now this engine's got a unique 2-way PCV valve system. We have the 2 PCV valves, one for the intake and the exhaust over here, that lead up to this T-pipe. Now under lower RPM, it's going to suck all of the PCV ventilation into the intake side, and under higher RPM, when you have boost, it's actually going to suck it down this way behind the turbocharger to be recycled. Now the cooling system in this Supra is what you'd find in any modern vehicle. You have the water pump, which is driven off of this fan pulley over here. Now luckily you can see that the timing belt actually runs around the water pump, so you can actually access that water pump without removing the timing belt. Now coolant's going to begin its journey at the overflow tank, which is in front of the radiator here. It'll then travel to the radiator itself. You can see this looks like an aftermarket unit, and it's pretty easy to service. We have this top radiator hose over here that leads into this coolant temperature assembly, which houses the thermostat as well as the coolant temperature sensor for the gauges inside the vehicle. Now once the coolant circulated through the block, we have this coolant hose here where it's going to then return over to the radiator. Now the cooling system is also going to have another loop that goes into the dash for the heater core. And now let's have a listen to the startup of this legendary engine. Now the Supra's windshield cowl doesn't even extend straight over the engine like most modern vehicles. It's just straight firewall at the back here. You can even see this is the wiper motor hanging out here with the wiper transmission linkage likely inside of that cowl. In terms of electronics underneath the hood, there isn't that much, although there was no real effort in the 80s to make a properly molded wiring harness. It's more like just wires kind of looped over and tied wherever they feel like. At the front here we have the battery, and then just behind it we have this minimalistic fuse box. You can see it uses the old style fuses here, not the mini fuses that modern vehicles use. You have a couple of relays and stuff scattered around here, and you've got this little diagnostic port here. This is the days before OBD where you had to read the blinky lights. Now the ECU is located underneath the glove box inside the vehicle. Unlike modern vehicles who have it underneath the hood, this one's stored away from the elements, which I like. It's also got a skid control actuator for a traction control system. Again, this vehicle was quite ahead of its time. So I was gonna show you guys underneath the car, but my brother decided to go under there, so we're gonna have to wait. Sorry. So here we have a look under the A70 Supra, and you can see that the entire underbody does not have any armor or any plastic, unlike modern vehicles for aerodynamics. Everything's just exposed and pretty simple and easy to access. Now taking a look at the exhaust setup on the 7M engine, we have a fairly short exhaust manifold for all 6 cylinders that come off of this head here. It'll then lead to this turbocharger, and that's going to help to spool up and boost the air that's going into it through the air intake system. That exhaust gas is then going to be expelled down the back of the pipe over here and into the rest of the exhaust system below the vehicle. Now this car's got a divorced downpipe, which means that you got any excess pressure built up in the turbo from the wastegate, it's just going to dump it straight down on the ground over here. And you can see this car's got a 3-inch exhaust that comes off of that turbocharger and leads down underneath the car. We've got a flex pipe over here, and then it goes down further. Now don't tell the EPA, because this one's got a cat delete before it goes out to the back of the...
Hey, you putting that on YouTube?
Now the exhaust is then going to travel out underneath the rear differential and then into the muffler at the back here to the tailpipe. And now we're going to have a listen to the exhaust. Sorry kids. Anyways, I'm just going to wipe this camera down. Now this engine just uses conventional oil. Now because this engine's a bit older and it does burn and leak some oil, my brother actually runs 10W40 weight oil. Now underneath the vehicle, just behind the subframe, we have this little oil pan and the oil drain bolt, which is pretty easy to access. So while it's easy to drain your oil, getting to the oil filter, it's located way inside of there. See where it says wicks? That's the oil filter, and it is really, really difficult to get to, especially with an oil filter wrench. Now because this is a straight 6 engine, the oil pan on this vehicle is huge. It starts way up at the front here. It's got a flat section underneath the subframe, and then sort of the sump section at the back here before ending near the bell housing. It's quite a big job if you want to change your oil pan. And like everything else in this vehicle, this one's also leaking. Now on the other side of the oil pan, we have the engine mounts. You can see this one mounts to the subframe on this side, and this one mounts to the subframe up on this side. And over here we have a little shock mount. Now behind this 7M GTE engine, we have an R154 manual transmission. This one's been swapped over in this particular vehicle. And you can see it's a pretty compact design, situated for rear wheel drive, of course. Servicing this transmission is not too hard. We have a fill port located up inside of here, and the drain plug located over here. You can also fill these transmissions from the shifter linkage inside the vehicle. Speaking of shifter linkage, the shifter linkage is actually located up in behind the transmission here, and it goes up into the console. Now because you can't fill these from the shifter linkage itself, this particular one is leaking up into the shifter linkage, so we're gonna have to fix that. Now that drive shaft's gonna send power to the back here to this rear differential. You can see this is a limited slip differential. We have the fill port for the differential here and the drain port for it down there, so it's pretty easy to surface. But that differential fluid is a little expensive and hard to find. Of course, we got a little coat hook here for the mechanic when he's working underneath here and the car's on the hoist. Unfortunately, servicing the starter on a 7M engine is pretty difficult, like most rear-wheel drive Toyotas. If you come down underneath this air intake here, you can barely make out this is where the starter is located, and accessing the bolt at the back there is pretty hard, but it can be done without removing the air intake. It's just not the funnest of jobs. Looking underneath this air intake, you can see this here is where the starter is located, and it is in quite of a tight spot. Now, as I've mentioned under the hood, the A70 Supra is quite unique, and there's also some interesting features on the interior of the vehicle. Now, in terms of safety features, besides ABS, you really don't get anything else. There's no airbags. All you get is really seat belts, and good old brakes. Now this vehicle was equipped with cruise control. Now not only is there a dashboard switch, but there's actually steering wheel controls associated with it, which is pretty cool. Now the instrument cluster is pretty standard for Toyotas of its age. This one you can see came from an automatic that had that power mode for the transmission. We've got a boost gauge over here, but what's most interesting is this vehicle originally came with Toyota electronically modulated suspension, which is the first of its time. Now in modern days you'd find these in some Lexus vehicles, and it would basically modulate the suspension shock absorbers based on road conditions, or a flick of a switch inside if you wanted it stiff or hard for the track. You can see next to the strut you've got an empty wire where the electronic modulated suspension would sit. This one's been removed obviously because that system is pretty expensive to maintain, and a good set of coilovers could probably do a better job in modern times. Now this car also came with automatic climate controls, which is pretty advanced. You can see this one comes with those push and stick kind of buttons that you'd find in an old cassette player or something. Now the cassette player is long gone from here and replaced by some kind of a touchscreen. We've got a pull-out ashtray over here and a little storage unit over here, but other than that there is no cup holders in this entire car. Now the 5-speed manual transmission is actually kind of notchy and a little bit difficult to engage, but luckily we have a good old school parking brake. Speaking of ahead of its time, we've got this lumbar support that not only you can move it in and out, but you can also move it left and right. You probably won't even find that in modern Lexus vehicles. Other amenities include power mirrors and of course power windows and door locks, which is actually pretty cool for 1987. Who would have thought that fake stitching would have been a thing so many years later? Now this one does have the Targa top, which is removable, but it does leak, just like my brother. Now as much as they say that sports cars are not practical, check out all the space that you have back here. You can probably fetch a couple of kids or a good set of tires when you go to the track. And of course, how can we forget everyone's favorite feature? Pop-up headlights. It's kind of sad that they've excluded this feature from many modern vehicles due to pedestrian impact regulations. Now this one's actually got its electronic motor located down here, and it's got an adjuster so you can adjust your headlight aim. It's pretty cool. Now the power steering setup in this vehicle is pretty conventional with the pump over here and a high pressure line that goes to the rack. Now the return line from the rack actually loops through the radiator and then back over to this reservoir over here. Now mounted to the subframe is the steering rack, and it's situated in front of the axle of the wheels, not in behind. This is called front steer and is typical on rear wheel drive vehicles. You can see that its hydraulics here don't have a far distance to go before it leads up to the power steering pump up over here. And like everything else in this vehicle, power steering too is also leaking. Now the braking system on the Supra is just like any other modern Toyota. You have a vacuum actuated brake booster here and this master cylinder. It's going to send hydraulic fluid out to the ABS module on the other side. And just beside it we have the fill for the slave cylinder for the clutch fluid. Now the hydraulic fluid is going to come from the master cylinder to this ABS module. That's right, ahead of its time once again. This vehicle is one of the first Toyotas to feature 3-channel ABS, so it's going to split out to the 2 front wheels and then 1 to the rear wheels and then split off from there. Now taking a look at the front brake setup on the Supra, it's pretty straightforward. We have the brake caliper mounted on the back side instead of on the front side. It's got a single piston caliper and a disc rotor. Now unlike many modern vehicles, this Supra uses a manual parking brake, and this is the cable that leads up to the parking brake mechanism located inside of here. Now the rear brake setup on the Supra is a simple disc brake setup with a single piston caliper and integrated parking brakes inside of the drum. Now you'll notice that there's no ABS sensors on this side because this is a 3-channel design. Now the suspension setup on the Supra is a little bit more interesting. We have the strut located in the middle here. We have a double wishbone design where we have an upper control arm here and a lower control arm down at the bottom here. Check out the size of the lower control arm of the Supra. It's a stamped steel arm and it's pretty chunky and pretty heavy. It's got a lower shock mount down here. You could probably find this on modern trucks now. Now the upper control arm is made of aluminum, but the steering knuckles are made of steel. Now at the bottom here we have the lower ball joint, which is a bolted on design, which makes it pretty easy to change without any press. Now because this control arm does have a shock on it, this is classified as a loaded ball joint, which supports the weight of the vehicle. So it's really important that you check this ball joint for play to make sure that your wheels don't fall off. Now over here we have the stabilizer link, and it looks bent. Now it attaches to this sway bar over here. Now the tie rods in the Supra are pretty standard. We have an inner and an outer tie rod setup, and instead of a jam nut, they use a pinch nut over here. Now overall, servicing the suspension should not be too difficult. It's pretty easy to work on, with the exception of one really long pivot bolt that goes through the upper control arm and has to come through the splash guard over here. Although it is a double wishbone design, it's going to be a little bit more maintenance than a McPherson. For a sports car, it's well suited. Now the rear suspension on the A70 Supra is a multi-link design. It's got an upper control arm over here. We have a strut that runs to the top with a shock in it. Down at the bottom here we have a lateral link. We have a trailing arm link over here. You can see this here is the stabilizer link that runs to the sway bar. So here we've got the axle as it comes out of the differential and goes into this knuckle. Now this knuckle is made of steel and it's got a pressed in bearing. Now overall this suspension design is pretty easy to work on. There's a lot of space around everything, and it's a design that you'd find in many modern cars nowadays, even regular sedans and sports cars. The one thing that makes this vehicle so well balanced is how far back the weight of it is pushed. You can see this here is the front of the engine, and this here is where the shock tower is, so the majority of the weight is actually behind the front wheel. Here we've got a look underneath the rear of the A70 Supra. You can see that we've got the gas tank located right at the back here, just behind the rear bumper. It reminds me of the Ford Pinto days. If you get rear-ended, it could probably explode. Now speaking of the fuel tank, the fuel pump is buried inside the tank, and you got to drop this entire tank down before you can access it. What's even worse is the fuel filter is located up inside of here above the differential, and you either got to drop the rear subframe or the differential in order to get access to it. It's not a very maintenance friendly fuel system. Now there wasn't that much in terms of emission regulations back in the 80s other than a catalytic converter and this big charcoal canister. You can see its line is actually not even connected, but it probably would connect to the airbox somewhere around this area. And that's pretty much what's under the hood of the Mark III Supra that makes it so unique. Now you tell me in the comment section down below if you prefer the Mark III, Mark IV, or the Mark V Supra. Now make sure you follow me on Instagram for more behind the scenes footage. Subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one, and if you want to see more of this car, subscribe to my Speed Car 100 channel where my brother is going to be posting some more repair videos.